The old gods were silent when the sky tore open above the haunted forest. No prayers had summoned it. No master's learning could explain it. Between one heartbeat and the next, the gray winter sky split like rotten cloth, bleeding light the color of dying stars. The tear screamed, a sound that made the ancient weirwoods shudder and caused every crow for 10 leagues to take panicked flight. Then something fell through, trailing fire and rage, crashing through the canopy of snow-laden pines with the fury of a falling star. The impact shook the frozen earth. Snow erupted in a white plume that painted the dark trees ghost pale. When the thunder of splintered wood finally ceased, silence returned to the forest. But it was the wrong kind of silence. The kind that comes when predators sense something apex has arrived. In the crater, surrounded by shattered trees and scorched earth that steamed in the bitter cold, a man rose to his feet. He was massive, built like the warriors of old legend, muscles carved from violence and warfare. Ash-pale skin marked him as no northerner, and the red tattoo that wrapped around his skull and torso spoke of gods and oaths unknown to Westeros. His eyes held the weight of centuries, gray as winter storms and twice as merciless. Snow melted where his breath touched air. Kratos, the ghost of Sparta, the god killer, stood in a world not his own and felt only cold familiarity. Another land, another war, another beginning. The blades of chaos materialized in his hands with a thought, chained instruments of divine punishment that had tasted the blood of Olympus itself. He turned slowly, assessing. Dense forest, winter. He ate the smell of pine and old death. Somewhere distant, wolves howled, but these were not the beasts he knew. Everything here felt diminished, smaller, mortal. Yet something else lingered in the air. Ancient magic, different from the godly power he'd destroyed, but no less real. It pulsed from the earth itself, from the trees with faces carved into their bark, from the very bones of this frozen land. Father? The word was instinct, searching for Atreus, but only silence answered. His son was not here. Whatever force had torn him from Midgard had separated them. Rage flickered in Kratos' chest, that familiar heat that had destroyed pantheons. But he crushed it down with the discipline of hard-won wisdom. Rage would not find his son. Rage had only ever destroyed. He began walking south, following an instinct carved by centuries of war. When in every land, conflict called to him like a lodestone, he would find civilization, find answers, find a way back to Atreus, and he would kill anything that stood between him and his son. The forest watched him go with wooden eyes. 3 days north of the wall, a ranging party of the Night's Watch had made camp in the ruins of an old wildling village. 12 black brothers huddled around fire that seemed to give less warmth with each passing night. Winter was coming. The words House Stark had warned of for generations, and the Watch felt it in their bones. Sir Jeremy Riker commanded the patrol, a grizzled veteran of 20 years on the wall. He'd seen things in the haunted forest that would drive Southern lords mad, whites that walked after death, shadows that moved wrong, cold that killed quicker than any blade. But nothing had prepared him for the man who walked into their camp as casually as a merchant entering an inn. "Hold!" Riker shouted, half his men scrambling for weapons. "Identify yourself!" The stranger stopped at the edge of firelight. In the dancing shadows, he looked carved from granite and violence. No furs despite the killing cold. Weapons that gleamed like fresh spilled blood. Scars that mapped a lifetime of warfare across flesh that somehow looked both ancient and ageless. "I seek the nearest settlement," the stranger said. His voice carried the weight of stone grinding against stone, accent strange and harsh. "Where am I?" "You're north of the wall, friend," Riker said carefully, hand on his sword. Something about this man triggered every survival instinct honed by years beyond civilization. Though how you got here without furs or supplies, I couldn't say. "What's your name?" "Kratos." The name meant nothing to any man present, but the way he said it, like an epitaph, like a warning, made several brothers step back. "Well, Kratos, you've picked a dangerous place for a stroll. These woods belong to wildlings and worse things." Riker studied the stranger's weapons with a soldier's eye. "Those blades, I've never seen their like. What house do you serve? No house. Kratos' gray eyes swept the camp, cataloging threats, exits, weaknesses, old habits. I serve only my son. We were separated. I must find a way back to him. Back? One of the younger rangers, John Umber, laughed nervously. Back from where? The wall's the end of the world, man. There's nothing north but ice and death. Kratos' gaze fixed on the boy with such intensity that Umber's laughter died. I have walked through Helheim itself. I have torn down Olympus. I have killed gods who claim to rule eternity. His voice dropped to something between promise and threat. This cold is nothing. This forest is nothing. Tell me of this wall, and I will trouble you no further. The Night's Watch brothers exchanged glances. Madman or liar, either way he was dangerous. Riker made a decision. The wall is a barrier of ice, 700 feet high, that stretches across the continent. It was built 8,000 years ago to keep out the darkness. We are the Night's Watch. We hold the wall. We guard the realms of men. He paused. If you truly want answers, come south with us. We return to Castle Black in 2 days, when the old bear can decide what to do with you. Kratos considered. He knew nothing of this land, these people, their conflicts, but he had learned patience in his later years. Information before action, understanding before bloodshed. I will come, he said finally. But know this, I am not your prisoner, and I will not be caged. Wouldn't dream of it, Riker replied, though his hand never left his sword. That night, Kratos sat apart from the Watch brothers, staring into the darkness beyond the firelight. He felt it out there, the same wrongness he'd sensed in Helheim, the stench of death that walked and hungered. This world had its own monsters, its own conflicts between order and chaos. And somewhere in the darkness, Blue Eyes watched the stranger who had fallen from the sky. The Night King felt the presence of something that should not be, something that carried the scent of dead gods and broken pantheons, something that might threaten the long night itself, or might be turned to serve it. In the ancient language of the first men, dead things whispered to each other through the frozen woods. A new piece had entered the game, and winter was still coming. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. Hope shines brightest in the darkest night. Kratos noticed none of the attention. His thoughts were far away, with a boy who needed his father, in a realm that seemed impossibly distant. He had crossed dimensions before, walked between life and death, and he climbed from Hades itself. He would find his way back, or burn this world trying. Castle Black rose from the southern base of the wall like a wound in the ice. Dark stone against blinding white, a fortress built not for glory, but for grim endurance. Kratos saw it first as a shadow on the horizon, then as a sprawling complex of towers, barracks, and keeps that spoke of ancient purpose. But it was the wall itself that commanded attention. 700 feet of ice, blue-white and ancient, stretching east and west until it disappeared into winter mist. Kratos had seen the great works of gods, Olympus in its glory, the world serpent coiled around Midgard, the Bifrost connecting realms. But this was mortal-made, crafted by human hands and sustained by human will across millennia. Impressive for mortals. The ranging party had been silent for most of the 3-day journey south. The Night's Watch brothers gave Kratos wide berth, whispering among themselves when they thought he couldn't hear. He caught fragments. Weapons never leave his hands. Doesn't sleep. Tracks through the snow, just stop sometimes like he wasn't there. They feared him. Good. Fear kept men cautious, and cautious men rarely did stupid things that forced him to kill them. Sir Jeremy Riker had tried conversation on the first day, asking about Kratos' homeland, his purpose, his strange accent. Kratos had answered in single words or not at all, until the veteran ranger understood that silence was preferred. But Riker was no fool. His eyes tracked every movement, every reaction, cataloging the stranger like a commander assessing an unknown enemy. On the second night, they'd heard sounds in the darkness. Footsteps that weren't quite right, breathing that came from throats that should have held no breath. The Rangers had gone pale, clutching dragon glass daggers and muttering prayers to old gods and new. Kratos had simply stood, blades of chaos igniting with that familiar flame, and walked toward the sounds. Whatever had been out there, and Kratos had glimpsed pale flesh, blue eyes, and the wrongness of animated death, had retreated before him. Not from fear, he sensed, but from calculation, as if something intelligent had measured him and decided the time was not yet right. The Night's Watch brothers had looked at him differently after that. Now, as they approached Castle Black's gates, Kratos noticed men along the wall's top, tiny figures against the vast ice, sure watching their approach. More brothers gathered in the courtyard as the gates groaned open, revealing a space of packed snow and weathered stone. An old man waited for them, flanked by rangers. He was shorter than Kratos by a head, but carried himself with the authority of a commander. White hair framed a face carved by northern winters, and shrewd eyes studied the stranger with the intensity of a man who'd spent decades judging threats. "Sir Jeremy," the old man said, voice carrying easily across the courtyard. "You returned 2 days late and with unexpected company." "Lord Commander Mormont," Reeker dismounted, bowing his head with respect. "We encountered this man 3 days north of the wall. He calls himself Kratos, claims to be separated from his son." The pause before separated carried volumes. Gior Mormont, Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, turned his full attention to Kratos. "North of the wall, you say? Interesting. We've had no reports of wildling movements in that sector." His gaze dropped to the blades of chaos. "And those weapons, I've never seen their like. Valyrian steel, perhaps?" "No, the color's wrong. Too red." Kratos met the old man's stare without flinching. He recognized leadership when he saw it, the kind built on competence and hard choices, not birthright or divine mandate. Similar to the Spartan generals of his youth, before the gods had twisted everything. "They are forged from the fires of my past," Kratos said simply, "and bound by oaths I can never break." "Cryptic," Mormont's expression didn't change. "I'm told you walked into Sir Jeremy's camp without supplies, without furs, seemingly without concern for the cold that kills men in hours. I'm told things in the darkness fled from you. I'm told you speak of gods and realms with the certainty of a madman or the memory of a very old man." He stepped closer, unafraid despite the massive size difference. "So tell me, Kratos, what are you?" The courtyard had gone silent. Every ranger, steward, and builder within earshot had stopped to watch the confrontation. Kratos could feel their tension, hands near weapons, ready to swarm him if their commander gave the word. He had faced such moments countless times. Gods demanding answers, kings requiring submission, armies positioned to attack. Always the same choice, subjugate or slaughter. But he had learned painfully that not every confrontation required bloodshed. "I am a warrior," Kratos said, letting the blades of chaos fade into the space between moments, not sheathed merely elsewhere, waiting to be recalled. The visible display of impossible power rippled through the watching crowd. "I am a father searching for his son. I am a stranger in your land, seeking knowledge of how I came to be here and how I might return home." He paused, gray eyes holding Mormont's without challenge or submission. "I am not your enemy, unless you make me one." Mormont studied him for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, the old man smiled, a thin, hard expression. "A father searching for his son. That at least I can understand. The gods know the Night's Watch is full of men running from something or searching for something." He turned, gesturing toward the main keep. "Come, Wuss, you'll freeze my men's balls off if I keep them standing in this courtyard. We'll speak in my solar, where wine might warm truth from that stone face of yours." Kratos followed, aware of the brothers parting before him like water around a ship's prow. Their fear was mixed with curiosity now. This stranger who'd made their Lord Commander smile, however grimly. They climbed stairs worn smooth by centuries of boots, passing through corridors lit by flickering torches. The warmth was minimal, but Kratos noted how the Night's Watch endured it without complaint. These were hard men, shaped by hard service. Mormont's solar was sparse, a desk cluttered with maps and reports, a few chairs, a hearth with a small fire. A raven sat on a perch near the window, watching with intelligent black eyes. "Corn," the raven croaked. "Corn! Corn!" "Quiet. Ira, you damn bird," Mormont muttered, pouring wine into 2 cups. He offered one to Kratos, who took it but didn't drink. Old habits. Never consume what you can't verify, especially from potential enemies. Mormont noticed but said nothing, taking a long drink from his own cup before settling into his chair. "Now then, let's speak plainly, man to man. You're no wildling. Wrong look, wrong weapons, wrong bearing. You're not from the 7 kingdoms. I'd have heard of a warrior matching your description. So that leaves very few possibilities. Most of them impossible." He leaned forward. "So I'll ask directly, what manner of magic brought you north of the wall?" "I do not know," Kratos admitted. It galled him, this ignorance, but truth served better than lies in this moment. "I was in another realm, a land of ice and gods, of world trees and dragons that coil around the earth. I fought beside my son against those who would bring Ragnarok. Then the sky tore open, and I fell through into your forest. Another realm." Mormont's expression didn't mock, but neither did it quite believe. "Like the tales the wildlings tell, of lands beyond the sunset sea, of cities in the sky. Old Nan would love you. She fills the boys' heads with such stories." He paused. "But you're no story, are you? You're real, dangerous, and lost. That makes you either a threat to the 7 kingdoms or a weapon against the darkness beyond the wall." "I am no one's weapon," Kratos said, voice dropping to a dangerous register. "I learned that lesson in blood and ash." "Fair enough." Mormont stood, moving to the window. Beyond, the wall rose like a frozen monument to human defiance. "Then let me tell you what you've walked into, stranger. The Night's Watch guards the realms of men against the darkness. For 8,000 years, we've held the wall against wildlings, raiders, and worse. But the Watch has fallen on hard times. We're less than 1,000 men, holding 300 miles of wall. The 7 kingdoms have forgotten us, see us as a dumping ground for criminals and bastards." He turned back, face grim. "And something's changing in the north. The dead walk. Creatures from legend stir in the frozen wastes. My rangers find whole wildling villages slaughtered, the people missing. Winter is coming, Kratos, not the winter of snow and cold, but the long night that the oldest stories warn of, when the dead rise and darkness covers the world." Kratos understood immediately. He'd seen such things before. Draugr and Midgard, undead warriors raised by Hell's power, the cursed armies that served dark gods. Every realm had its deathwalkers, its corruption that twisted life into mockery. "I have fought the dead before," he said simply. "They fall like anything else if you know where to strike." "Dragon glass or fire," Mormont agreed. "But there's more to it than simply fighting. There's the question of why. Why now, after thousands of years of silence? Why are the White Walkers returning?" He studied Kratos carefully. "And why did a warrior who claims to have killed gods fall from the sky precisely when we need warriors most? The old gods work in mysterious ways, or so the Northerners claim." "Your gods did not summon me," Kratos said flatly, "and I owe them nothing. Perhaps, but you're here nonetheless, when at the end of the world, in the one place where strength and skill might actually matter more than gold or titles." Mormont returned to his chair, suddenly looking every year of his age. "I won't cage you. I don't have the men, and I suspect it wouldn't work anyway. But I'll make you an offer. Stay at Castle Black, train with my rangers, learn about this land while you search for a way home. In return, if the darkness comes while you're here, you fight beside us." It was fair as offers went. Kratos needed time to understand this world, to find whatever magic had brought him here and might return him to Atreus. The Night's Watch offered purpose while he searched, and fighting the undead was something he understood. "I accept," Kratos said, "but know this. If I find a way back to my son, I will take it, regardless of any battle you face." Mormont smiled that hard smile again. "Honest, at least. That's more than most men give me." He raised his cup. "To strange alliances in stranger times." Kratos finally drank, the wine harsh and warm. Outside, snow began to fall again, covering Castle Black in fresh white. Somewhere far beyond the wall, blue eyes watched and calculated. The Night King had felt the stranger's power, measured it against the coming darkness, and found it interesting. Winter was coming, but so was something the Long Night had never faced before. A god killer with nothing left to lose but his son. The Weirwood Grove stood 5 miles north of the wall, a place where the old gods still whispered through carved faces and bleeding sap. Kratos had insisted on returning beyond the wall, ignoring Mormont's warnings about the dangers. The Lord Commander had finally relented, sending a small patrol led by a gruff ranger named Corin Halfand, a legendary warrior who'd lost 2 fingers to a wildling axe but gained a reputation that made even the free folk wary. "You don't talk much," Corin observed as they climbed through snow-heavy pines. His remaining 3 fingers rested casually on his sword hilt. "Most men heading beyond the wall chatter from nerves. You just walk." Kratos didn't respond. He was tracking something, a presence he'd felt since arriving in this realm, watching from the white wood trees with their unsettling carved faces. It reminded him of the World Tree's awareness, but colder, more alien. The 5 rangers with them clutched their weapons tighter as they entered the grove. One ancient weirwood surrounded a frozen pool, their bone-white barks stark against the gray sky. Red leaves rustled, though no wind blew. The carved faces, mouths open in silent screams or songs, seemed to track their movement. "The old gods watch," muttered one ranger, making a sign against evil. Kratos approached the largest weirwood, studying the face carved into its trunk. Red sap oozed like blood from its eyes. He'd seen divine power in many forms: Zeus's lightning, Poseidon's seas, Freya's magic. This was different, not the power of individual gods, but something older, more diffused. The land itself made aware. He reached out, pressing his palm against the white bark. The world exploded into vision. A vast network of roots beneath the earth, connecting every weirwood across the continent, whispering with the memories of millennia. The thousands of voices speaking at once, showing him fragments. Armies of ice, a wall being built, children of the forest with obsidian eyes, the first men kneeling before heart trees, and something else, something that had noticed him, that was reaching back through the connection. Kratos jerked his hand away, the blades of chaos materializing instantly. The rangers scrambled back, weapons drawn. "What is it?" Corin demanded, scanning the trees. "What did you see?" Before Kratos could answer, the temperature plummeted. Breath became visible fog. The red leaves of the weirwoods blackened and crumbled. Ice crept across the pool with unnatural speed. "Gods preserve us," one ranger whispered. "White walkers." They emerged from the trees like winter given form. Tall figures clad in ancient armor that seemed forged from frozen starlight. Their skin was pale as milk, dead as corpses, and their eyes burned with cold blue fire. They moved with eerie grace, ancient swords of ice raised. Behind them came the whites, the risen dead. Dozens of corpses stumbling forward with jerky movements, preserved by the cold, animated by dark magic Kratos recognized. Death magic, necromancy, the same corruption that had plagued every realm he'd known. "Form up," Corin roared, the rangers closing ranks with practiced discipline. "Dragon glass and fire! Don't let them touch you!" The White Walkers attacked in silence. No battle cries or war drums, just the terrible, quiet advance of death itself. The first ranger to meet them swung his dragon glass dagger, catching a white in the skull. The corpse collapsed, magic severed. But 3 more replaced it, grabbing at the ranger with frozen hands. Kratos moved. He crossed the distance in a blur of speed no mortal should possess. The blades of chaos screaming through the air in burning arcs. The first white disintegrated as divine fire met reanimated flesh. The flames that had burned Olympus itself, reducing the corpse to ash in seconds. 2 more fell to his next strikes, the chains whipping with precision born from centuries of combat. A White Walker turned toward him, sensing something different, something dangerous. Its ice sword came up in a guard position that spoke of ancient skill. Kratos didn't slow. He'd fought gods who claimed mastery of weapons. This pale creature, however ancient, was just another enemy. Their blades met with a sound like breaking crystal. The White Walker's strength was immense, far beyond mortal, backed by millennia of unnatural existence. It would have overpowered any human warrior. Kratos was not human. He drove forward, raw power shattering the creature's guard. The blade of chaos carved through its armor, through its chest. The White Walker's eyes widened, perhaps the first surprise it had felt in thousands of years, as divine fire spread through its form. It shattered like glass, fragments scattering across the snow. The effect on the Whites was immediate. 24 corpses collapsed simultaneously, the magic animating them severed with their master's destruction. But more White Walkers emerged from the trees. 4, then 6, then 8. They surrounded Kratos and the Rangers with calculated precision, ice swords raised. The temperature dropped further. Frost spread across Kratos' beard and hair. "Fall back to the wall!" Khorne shouted, his men forming a fighting retreat. But Kratos stood his ground, recognizing the moment for what it was, a test. The White Walkers wanted to measure him, understand what he was. They'd heard his arrival in their domain, felt the dimensional tear that brought a god-killer to their realm. Now they would see if he was threat or opportunity. Fine, let them see. Kratos roared, not words, just the primal fury of Spartan rage unleashed. His skin blazed with red energy, the divine power he'd inherited from Ares and never fully suppressed. The blades of chaos ignited with fire hot enough to melt the snow for 20 feet in every direction. He became a whirlwind of flame and steel. The White Walkers attacked in concert, centuries of coordination making them deadly opponents. Their ice swords struck faster than human eyes could follow, not each blow capable of freezing flesh solid. They would have overwhelmed any mortal warrior in seconds. But Kratos had fought the Furies. He'd battled Hercules and Boulder. He'd struck down Zeus himself. These ancient creatures were powerful, yes, but they were not gods. The first White Walker lunged from his left. Kratos caught the ice sword on his blade's chain, wrapping it, jerking the creature off balance. His other blade took its head. The second attacked from behind, impossibly fast. Kratos spun, the chains extending impossibly, fire trailing in burning arcs that carved through armor and frozen flesh. A third managed to score his shoulder, ice burning through skin. Kratos felt the unnatural cold trying to spread, to freeze his blood. He channeled Spartan rage through the wound, divine heat cauterizing and purging the death magic. The White Walker that struck him barely had time to register surprise before Kratos' fist, wrapped in chain and fire, caved in its chest. 3 down, 5 remaining. The White Walkers retreated a step, reassessing. They gestured, and the Weirwood Grove responded. The pool exploded upward in a wave of frozen water. The trees themselves seemed to lean in, branches grasping like skeletal fingers. The White Walkers were older than the wall, older than the kingdoms of men. They knew this land in ways the living had forgotten. But Kratos had fought in dying realms before. He'd battled in Helheim, where the very ground opposed him, in Olympus, where the gods themselves twisted reality against him. Geography was just another enemy to overcome. He charged through the frozen wave, ice shattering against his momentum. A White Walker's ice sword caught him across the ribs. More pain, more cold trying to invade his body. Kratos ignored it. Pain was familiar. Pain was nothing compared to the weight of the souls he'd killed, the family he'd destroyed, the gods he'd murdered. These creatures understood death, but Kratos had transcended it repeatedly. His blade found another White Walker's heart. The creature shattered, taking 20 more Whites with it. The remaining 4 White Walkers communicated in a language of clicks and hisses that predated human speech. Then they did something unexpected. They retreated, not in panic, but with deliberate calculation. They'd learned what they needed to know. Kratos let them go. He was here for his son, not to wage war against this realm's monsters. But he stood in the center of the grove, surrounded by shattered ice and ash, breathing heavily as Spartan rage faded. The wounds on his shoulder and ribs were already healing, his divine nature reasserting itself. Khorne and his rangers emerged from their defensive positions, staring at the carnage. 12 White Walkers had attacked. 4 remained alive. The math spoke for itself. "By the 7, one ranger breathed. "What are you?" Khorne's expression was harder to read. Respect, yes, but also calculation. He'd watched Kratos fight, seen the impossible speed, the divine fire, the wounds that would have killed any man, barely slowing him down. "You're no simple warrior," Corin said slowly. "You fought like the heroes from the old stories, like Azor Ahai or Simeon Star Eyes." He approached carefully. "The White Walkers retreated from you. In 10 years ranging beyond the wall, I've never seen them retreat." Kratos turned, meeting the ranger's gaze. "They learned I am not prey. They will return, but not today." "And what about you?" Corin gestured to the wounds, already nearly healed. "Will you return? Because Lord Commander Mormont needs to know exactly what you are. The Night's Watch can't afford mysteries, not with winter coming." "I am what I have always been," Kratos said, the blades of chaos fading once more. "A warrior who has lost everything and seeks only to protect what remains." He started walking back toward the wall. "Your White Walkers are powerful, but I have fought worse." The Rangers followed in stunned silence. Behind them, the weirwood faces continued to weep red sap, and in the distance, the Night King stood atop a frozen ridge, already watching the ghost of Sparta depart. The ancient enemy of all life had witnessed something new, something that could kill White Walkers with the ease of cutting wheat, something that burned with fire that death itself feared. In 8,000 years of existence, the Night King had never encountered its like. This changed calculations, changed strategies. The long night was coming, yes, but now there was a variable that didn't fit the ancient patterns. A weapon that served neither the living nor the dead, but only its own purpose. The Night King gestured to its remaining lieutenants. They would watch, they would learn, and when the time came, they would determine if this Kratos could be turned, destroyed, or simply avoided until after humanity fell. Because winter was still coming, and the dead had patience the living could never match. News of the battle beyond the wall spread through Castle Black like wildfire through dry kindling. By the time Kratos returned, blood-stained and silent, half the watch had gathered in the courtyard to witness the warrior who'd slaughtered White Walkers and lived. They parted before him with a mixture of awe and fear. The same look Kratos had seen in the eyes of mortals who witnessed divine power and understood how small they truly were. Lord Commander Mormont stood at the top of the steps, face carved from granite. "My Solar, now." The command was sharp, brooking no argument. Kratos followed without protest, aware of Corin Halfhand trailing behind, still clutching his sword as though expecting another attack at any moment. Inside the Solar, Mormont poured 3 cups of wine with hands that trembled slightly. Not from fear, Kratos noted, but from suppressed fury. The old bear was angry and had every right to be. 8 White Walkers dead," Mormont said without preamble, voice low and dangerous. 8. In 8,000 years of history, maybe a dozen confirmed kills of White Walkers total. You managed 8 in one fight. He drank deeply, eyes never leaving Kratos. "Corin tells me you move faster than human eyes could follow. That fire erupted from your skin. That wounds that should have killed you healed in minutes. So I'll ask you one more time, and by the old gods and the new, you'll give me the truth. What are you?" Kratos stood in the center of the room, blood still drying on his skin, and made a choice. These men had shown him respect, offered aid without demanding servitude. They deserved honesty, even if they couldn't fully comprehend it. "And I was born mortal," he began, voice rough as stone grinding. "A Spartan warrior in a land far from here. I had a wife, a daughter. I loved them." The words came hard, they always did. "But I was tricked by a god of war named Ares. He made me kill my own family while under his curse. When I discovered what I'd done, I sought vengeance." Mormont and Corin exchanged glances but said nothing. "I killed Ares, took his power and became the god of war myself. Then I waged war against all of Olympus, Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, all the gods who had tormented mortals for millennia. I tore down their mountain, destroyed their temples, killed them all." Kratos met Mormont's eyes. "I am a god killer. That is what I am. That is what I will always be." The silence stretched like a blade's edge. Finally, Corin spoke, voice carefully neutral. "In the north, we have stories. Azor Ahai, who forged Lightbringer and drove back the darkness. The last hero, who fought the White Walkers with a sword of dragon steel. Legends." He leaned forward. "Are you saying you're like them?" A chosen warrior of prophecy? I am no one's chosen, Kratos said flatly. I do not serve prophecy or fate. I make my own path, even if it leads through the corpses of gods. Mormont stood, pacing to the window. Beyond, the wall rose like a frozen promise. Let's assume I believe you, and after what Khorne described, I'm inclined to. That makes you either the greatest weapon the Watch has ever possessed, or the most dangerous threat to ever approach the wall. He turned back. The question is, what do you want? Because gods don't simply appear and offer help without price. Every story tells us that. I want my son, Kratos said simply. Nothing more. I will search for the magic that brought me here, for any way to return to my realm. While I search, I will fight your enemies if they threaten me or those I choose to protect. But I will not be commanded. I will not kneel, and I will leave the moment I find a way home, regardless of any war you face. Honest to the point of insult, Mormont muttered, but there was grudging respect in his tone. Most men would lie, promise loyalty, play at politics. He returned to his desk, suddenly looking every year of his age. The wall has stood for 8,000 years because the Watch has always done what was necessary, even when kings and lords forgot us. If you can kill White Walkers, truly kill them, not just survive them, then I'd be a fool to turn you away. There's another consideration, Khorne interjected. Word of this will spread. The Watch can't keep secrets. Too many men, too many ravens. Within a fortnight, every lord from Winterfell to King's Landing will hear about the warrior beyond the wall who burns with divine fire and slaughters White Walkers. He fixed Kratos with a measuring look. Men will come. They'll want to see you, test you, recruit you, or kill you. And if they believe you're truly a god— I am not a god, Kratos interrupted. Not anymore. I walked away from godhood, seeking something better. I found it in my son. His voice softened fractionally. But I still carry the power. It cannot be removed, only controlled. And I have learned control. Then control it here, Mormont said, coming to a decision. Waikiori, stay at Castle Black. Train my rangers in whatever you're willing to teach. When the White Walkers come in force, and they will, fight beside us. In return, we'll give you access to our meisters, our libraries, whatever ancient knowledge we possess about magic in realms beyond this one. He paused. And we'll keep the truth of what you are as quiet as possible, for as long as possible. No sense inviting every ambitious lord and mad king to our doorstep. It was more than fair. Kratos needed information, and these men knew this land, its history, its magic better than he could learn alone. And the White Walkers were a genuine threat, not to him, but to innocents who couldn't defend themselves. He'd spent enough years protecting those weaker than himself. It had become habit, perhaps even penance. Agreed, Kratos said. Or then you'll train with Khorne, Mormont declared. He's the best ranger we have, and he's taught more men to survive beyond the wall than anyone alive. You'll also speak with Master Eamon, our oldest brother, blind but wise. If anyone knows about ancient magic and prophecies, it's him. Khorne nodded slowly. I'll teach you what I can about this land and its dangers. But I'll say this now, Kratos. I watched you fight. You have skill and power beyond anything I've seen. But you don't know wildlings, don't know the politics of the Seven Kingdoms, don't know the 1,000 ways this land will try to kill you that have nothing to do with swords. He stood, hand resting on his weapon. Pride has killed more rangers than White Walkers ever have. Even a god killer can bleed out from an arrow in the back. I have learned humility, Kratos said, a voice heavy with old pain. I have paid for my arrogance with everything I ever loved. I do not need your lessons in pride, Ranger, but I will learn what you have to teach about survival. The tension in the room shifted, not quite respect, but mutual understanding between warriors who'd both paid heavy prices for their skills. A knock interrupted them. A young steward entered, pale-faced and nervous. Lord Commander, a raven from Winterfell, Lord Eddard Stark requests information about reports of strange lights and sounds beyond the wall. He's concerned. Mormont sighed deeply. Of course he is. Ned Stark is too honorable for his own good, but he's also no fool. If he's heard rumors already— He waved dismissively. Send a reply. Tell him we're investigating unusual activity. Nothing confirmed. A standard watch business. The steward bowed and fled. That's the problem with gods falling from the sky, Mormont said half to himself. They make noise, and in Westeros, noise attracts attention you don't want. He fixed Kratos with a hard stare. You say you fought in wars, killed gods, destroyed kingdoms? Then you know that the most dangerous enemies aren't always the ones with swords. Sometimes they're the ones with crowns, with gold, with words that can turn armies against you. Kratos thought of Athena's manipulations, of Zeus's political games, of how Olympus had turned every god against him through lies and fear. I know, he said quietly. I have faced such enemies before. They died like all the others. And if killing them starts a war that burns the 7 kingdoms? Corin asked pointedly. I know if lords march on the wall because they see you as a threat? We're 700 men, Kratos. We can't fight the entire realm. Then they should not make me their enemy, Kratos replied. But even as he said it, he felt the old weariness creeping back. Every realm was the same. Power attracted conflict, strength invited challenge, difference bred fear. He'd learned this lesson in blood across multiple worlds. Perhaps this realm would be different, or perhaps it would end the same way, with ashes and corpses and Kratos walking away, alone, toward the next horizon. Mormont seemed to read something in his expression. Get some rest, he said, tone gentler. You've earned it. Tomorrow we'll begin sorting out this mess. And Kratos? The old bear's eyes were knowing, sad in a way that spoke of his own losses. I've never met a god, Anna, but I've known warriors who've lost everything. You've got that look, the one that says you're searching for a reason to keep fighting. Maybe you'll find it here, or maybe you'll just find more pain. Either way, your Night's Watch now, at least until you find your way home. I have not sworn your oath, Kratos pointed out. No, but you've bled on our wall, fought our enemies, and shared our wine. That's oath enough for me. Mormont returned to his paperwork, effectively dismissing them. Now get out, both of you. I have reports to falsify and lies to craft for Southern lords. Corin led Kratos through the castle's corridors, stopping at a small room with a bed, a chest, and little else. Your quarters, the ranger said. Simple, but we're not exactly known for luxury. It is enough. Kratos had slept in far worse, in caves, on stone, one in the ruins of civilizations he'd destroyed. Comfort had stopped mattering decades ago. Corin lingered at the door. One more thing. When we train tomorrow, I'll teach you about Westeros, about the dangers here. But I want to learn from you too. Your fighting style, I've never seen anything like it. Those chains, the way you move. He shook his head. If even a fraction of that could be taught to my rangers, we might actually survive what's coming. Kratos considered. Teaching implied connection, investment in this world's survival. Every instinct said to remain apart, to avoid attachment that could only lead to loss. But Corin had fought beside him without hesitation. These Night's Watch brothers stood against darkness with courage that reminded Kratos of Spartans, outnumbered, forgotten, but unbending. I will teach what can be taught, Kratos said finally. Though mortal men cannot replicate divine strength, there are techniques, strategies that do not rely on godhood. These I can share. Corin nodded, satisfied. Good. Because winter is coming, Kratos. The real winter. And when it arrives, we'll need every advantage we can get. He paused. Your son, what's his name? Atreus. Atreus, Corin repeated, testing the foreign sound. I hope you find him. No man should be separated from his boy. I'll help however I can. The ranger left and Kratos was alone. He sat on the bed, staring at his hands. Hands that had killed gods, destroyed pantheons, shattered worlds. Hands that had also held his daughter, his wife, his son. The duality never resolved, never found balance. Somewhere in the night, a wolf howled, a sound that reminded him of Fenrir, of Midgard, of home. Atreus was out there, in another realm, perhaps searching for his father with the same desperate determination. The thought made Kratos' chest tighten with an ache that even divine power couldn't heal. I will find you, boy, he whispered to the darkness. I swear it. Whatever gods or kings stand in my way, I will find you. Outside his window, snow fell steadily, covering Castle Black in white silence. And far to the south, in the warm halls of power where lords played their game of thrones, ravens carried whispered rumors of a warrior beyond the wall, a ghost pale as ash, who burned like fire, who killed the unkillable. The game was changing. New pieces were on the board. And Kratos, god-killer and father, wanted no part of it. But wanting had never mattered. Not in any world. The raven arrived at Winterfell on black wings, carrying words that would ripple across the north like cracks in winter ice. Lord Eddard Stark stood in the rookery, reading the message by torchlight, his weathered face growing more troubled with each line. Behind him, his eldest son Robb waited, tall and dark-haired, already showing the strength that would make him a formidable lord. "Father?" Robb asked, noting the tension in his father's shoulders. Ned folded the parchment carefully, his gray eyes distant. The Night's Watch reports unusual activity beyond the wall. Rangers engage White Walkers in force, something that hasn't happened in living memory. He paused, weighing his next words. They also mention a stranger who appeared north of the wall, a warrior of considerable skill. How considerable? The message is vague, but Jeor Mormont doesn't send ravens for nothing. He's requesting I keep this quiet, which means whatever happened was significant enough to worry him. Ned moved to the window, looking north toward the distant wall, invisible beyond the horizon. "Winter is coming, Robb. The words of our house aren't just a warning, they're a promise, and I fear that promise is about to be kept." Far to the south in the Red Keep of King's Landing, another raven found another master. Varys, the spider, master of whisperers, read the message with interest, his soft hands folding the parchment as his mind calculated implications. "Little birds sing such curious songs," he murmured to himself, already composing messages to his network of spies. A warrior beyond the wall who fought White Walkers. It could be nothing, exaggeration, northern superstition, or it could be something that shifted the balance of power in the Seven Kingdoms. Information was currency, and Varys was suddenly very rich. But these southern machinations meant nothing to Kratos. While lords and spies began their games, he stood in Castle Black's training yard as dawn broke gray and cold over the wall. Corran Halfhand faced him, sword drawn, 3 fingers wrapped around the hilt with the ease of decades. Around them, 24 rangers had gathered to watch. Word had spread that the stranger who killed White Walkers would spar with their best warrior. "We'll start simple," Corran said, circling slowly. "Show me how you fight without those chain blades. Hand to hand, sword to sword. The basics." Kratos had accepted a practice sword from the armory, a dull blade of castle-forged steel, heavier than the weapons these men typically used. It felt like a child's toy in his hands, but he understood the purpose. These men needed to see his technique, not his divine power. "Begin," Kratos said. Corran attacked without warning. A testing strike, fast and precise, aimed at Kratos' shoulder. The ranger was skilled, his movements efficient, his blade work honed by countless battles. Any normal opponent would have struggled to react. Kratos sidestepped, his practice sword coming up to deflect with minimal movement. Corran followed with a series of rapid strikes, each one perfectly placed, each one searching for weakness. Kratos parried them all, his defense absolute, his counters non-existent. "Wait, you're holding back," Corran observed, breathing slightly harder. "I can feel it. You're letting me attack." "I am learning your style," Kratos replied. "Watch." He moved, not with divine speed, not with godly power, just with the skill of a warrior who'd trained since childhood, who'd fought in the armies of Sparta, who'd perfected his craft through centuries of battle. His sword became a blur of controlled strikes, each one aimed with surgical precision at Corran's defenses. The ranger defended desperately, his 3-fingered grip somehow maintaining control as steel rang against steel. But Kratos was simply better, faster without being supernatural, stronger without being divine, more skilled without being unfair. Within 20 exchanges, Corran's sword went flying, and Kratos' practice blade rested against the ranger's throat. The watching rangers erupted in whispers. Kratos lowered his blade, offering his hand. Corran took it. pulling himself up with a rueful smile. 7 hells, the ranger breathed. And that was without your full strength? That was with the skill any man could learn, given time and dedication, Kratos said, loud enough for the watching rangers to hear. I did not use divine power. I did not move faster than human capability. What you saw was pure technique, decades of training, nothing more. Decades, one young ranger called out. You don't look that old. Kratos' gray eyes fixed on the boy with an intensity that made him step back. I am far older than I appear, and I have learned that skill matters more than strength, discipline more than divine power. This I can teach. For the next hour, Kratos demonstrated techniques, proper stance, efficient strikes, how to read an opponent's weight distribution, where to aim for maximum effect. He corrected grips, adjusted postures, showed them how to fight larger opponents by targeting joints and weak points rather than trying to match strength. The Rangers absorbed everything with the intensity of men who knew their lives depended on such knowledge. These weren't soft Southern knights training for tournaments. These were survivors who understood that every lesson might be the difference between life and death beyond the wall. Corin watched it all with calculating eyes. You're a natural teacher, he observed during a water break. Most skilled warriors can't explain what they do. It's instinct. But you break it down, make it understandable. I trained my son, Kratos said simply. And something in his voice made Corin drop the subject. The morning wore on. Kratos sparred with ranger after ranger, never losing, but always teaching. He showed them how to fight multiple opponents, how to use terrain, how to remain calm when facing overwhelming odds. Lessons learned in Sparta, refined in Olympus, perfected across realms. It was during a break that Maester Aemon arrived, guided by a young steward. The old man was ancient beyond measure, blind eyes milky white, but he carried himself with dignity that transcended physical frailty. I hear a new voice in our yard, Aemon said, his accent carrying the refinement of old nobility. One that speaks of battles and teaching. You must be Kratos. I am. Kratos studied the old man, noting the chain around his neck. Dozens of metal links representing different fields of study. A scholar then, but one who'd chosen the wall over whatever life he'd left behind. Walk with me, Aemon suggested. These old bones aren't suited for training yards anymore, but my mind still wanders far, and I'm told you have questions about magic and realms beyond our own. They walked along the wall's base, the massive ice structure rising impossibly high beside them. Aemon moved slowly but surely, his stick tapping against stone with practiced rhythm. Lord Commander Mormont briefed me on your unusual arrival, Aemon said carefully. A warrior from another realm, seeking his son, possessing powers we don't understand. In my younger days, I would have dismissed such tales as fancy, but I've lived too long, seen too much to dismiss anything. He paused. Tell me of your home. Help an old man understand what manner of world produces warriors who can kill White Walkers. Kratos found himself speaking more than he'd intended. Perhaps it was the old man's gentle manner, or perhaps it was simply loneliness, the need to voice memories of a place he might never see again. He spoke of Midgard, of the world tree Yggdrasil connecting 9 realms, of gods who walked among mortals and demanded worship through fear. And you killed these gods? Aemon asked, no judgment in his voice, only curiosity. They deserved death, Kratos said flatly. They tortured mortals for sport, demanded sacrifice, twisted love into weapons. I freed the people from their tyranny. At what cost? The question hung in the cold air. Kratos was silent for a long moment. Everything, he finally said. I lost my family, my home, my purpose. I became the monster I fought against, until my son reminded me I could be more. His voice roughened. He is all I have left. Everything I do, every choice I make, is to return to him. Aemon nodded slowly as if confirming something. Love makes us stronger and weaker in equal measure. I too gave up much for duty, a throne, a family, a life I might have lived. The gods know if I chose wisely. He stopped, turning his blind eyes toward Kratos. You mentioned the world tree. We have stories here, old stories from before the first men, of a great tree that connected realms. The weirwoods, sacred to the old gods, are said to be fragments of something greater. I touched one of your weirwoods, Kratos said, remembering the vision. It showed me connections, memories, something aware. The green seers, Aemon breathed. Our the children of the forest, who could see through the trees, who communed with the old gods. Most believe they're extinct, but he trailed off thoughtfully. If your arrival was magical in nature, perhaps the answer lies in the old magic, the kind that predates the Seven Kingdoms, that existed when the children and the first men warred, when the long night first fell. Can this magic return me to my realm? I don't know, Aemon admitted, but I know someone who might. Beyond the wall, far to the north, there's said to be a three-eyed crow, a green seer who sees through time itself. The wildlings speak of him in whispers. If anyone understands the connections between realms, it would be him. Hope, small and sharp as a blade, pierced through Kratos' chest. Where? North of the haunted forest, in a cave protected by the children of the forest. Aemon's expression was grave. But the journey is near impossible. The White Walkers control that territory. The cold alone kills most men, and the three-eyed crow may not even exist. It could be legend, nothing more. I have walked through Helheim, Kratos said. I have crossed the realm of the dead itself. I will reach this crow. Not alone you won't, Corin's voice interrupted. The ranger had approached silently, clearly having listened to the conversation. The lands beyond the haunted forest are suicide for a lone traveler, even one who can kill White Walkers. You'll need guides, supplies, knowledge of the terrain. I need no, Kratos began. Pride, Corin cut him off sharply. I warned you about pride. You might be able to fight anything that attacks you. But can you track through a blizzard? Know which ice is safe to cross? Read the signs of an approaching storm? Find food when everything's frozen? He stepped closer, voice hard. Your son needs you alive, not frozen solid because you were too stubborn to accept help. The words struck home. Kratos thought of Atreus waiting, worrying, searching. Every delay mattered. Every mistake was time lost. And the ranger was right. He knew nothing of this frozen wasteland's specific dangers. What do you propose? I'll take you, Corin said simply. Small party, me, you, maybe 3 others who've ranged that far north before. We travel light, move fast, avoid the dead when possible, fight when necessary. If this three-eyed crow exists, we'll find him. If he doesn't, the ranger shrugged. Arna, at least we'll have tried. Lord Commander Mormont won't approve, Aemon said quietly. Losing his best ranger on what might be a fool's errand? The old bear will understand, Corin replied. Besides, if Kratos goes alone and dies, we lose the best weapon we have against the White Walkers. This way, at least I can try to keep him alive long enough to be useful. Despite everything, Kratos felt something like respect for the ranger's pragmatism. Corin didn't offer help from kindness or duty. He offered it from cold calculation. It was honest in its way. When can we leave? 3 days, Corin said. I need to assemble supplies, pick the right men, and plan the route. Use that time to keep training the rangers. Share what you can. If we don't return... He left the implication hanging. Aemon placed a withered hand on Kratos' arm. And one more thing. The three-eyed crow, if he exists, sees through time. Past, present, future. All one to him, according to legend. If you meet him, be careful what you ask. Some knowledge is more curse than blessing. Kratos had learned that lesson well. He'd seen the future in his nightmares, witnessed what he would become, fought against prophecy only to fulfill it through his struggle. I seek only one thing, the way home to my son, nothing more. Then I pray you find it, Aemon said softly, and that the cost isn't more than you can bear. The old master left, guided away by his steward, leaving Kratos and Corin standing in the shadow of the wall. 3 days, Kratos repeated, committing it to memory. 3 days of waiting, of teaching, of preparation. Then a journey into the heart of winter's domain, to seeking a legend that might not exist, chasing a hope that might be false. But it was hope nonetheless, and hope was all he had. That night, Kratos stood atop the wall, staring north into the darkness. The wind cut like blades, and the temperature would have killed any normal man in hours. But Kratos barely felt it. His thoughts were far away, with a boy who was probably doing the same thing, staring into the distance, wondering if his father still lived, still searched. "I'm coming, Atreus," he whispered to the frozen wind. "Whatever lies between us, I will cross it. Wait for me." The wind carried his words north, into the lands of ice and death, where ancient enemies stirred and plotted. The Night King heard those words, borne on currents of magic and cold, and recognized them for what they were: a promise, an oath, the kind that could reshape worlds. The game was accelerating, pieces were moving into position, and the long night was coming, carrying with it a conflict that would determine not just the fate of Westeros, but whether a father would ever see his son again. 3 days until the journey began. 3 days until everything changed. The great hall of Winterfell filled with the smell of roasted meat and wood smoke as the Stark household gathered for the evening meal. Lord Eddard sat at the head of the long table, his wife Catelyn beside him, their children arranged according to age and station. The warmth of the hall stood in stark contrast to the cold seeping through the ancient stones. Winter's advance could be felt even here, in the heart of the North. "Father," Robb said during a lull in conversation, "the men are talking about the wall. Now, they say something's happening. Rangers disappearing, strange sightings." He kept his voice low, aware of younger ears. "Is it true?" Ned's gray eyes moved to his son, measuring how much truth to share. At 17, Robb was nearly a man grown, training to one day rule Winterfell. He deserved honesty. "Lord Mormont sent word of unusual activity beyond the wall," Ned said carefully. "White Walkers have been engaged by Rangers, something that hasn't happened in living memory. The Watch is investigating." "White Walkers?" young Bran interrupted, eyes wide with the wonder of a boy of 10. "Like in old Nan's stories?" "Stories are just stories," Catelyn said quickly, though her hand tightened on her cup. "Nothing for you to worry about." But Ned saw the question in his wife's eyes. She was from the Riverlands, and unaccustomed to the North's darker legends, but she learned to trust her husband's instincts, and his instincts were screaming warnings. Later, in the privacy of their chambers, Catelyn confronted him directly. "What aren't you telling them?" Ned stood at the window, looking north as he so often did these days. Mormont mentioned something else, a stranger who appeared beyond the wall, a warrior of considerable skill who fought White Walkers and survived. He turned to face her. Jorah Mormont is not a man given to exaggeration or flights of fancy. If he bothered to mention this warrior, it means something significant has changed. "Should you ride to the wall? Speak with him directly?" "I've considered it," Ned admitted. "But leaving Winterfell now, with winter coming," he shook his head, "I'll send my best scouts north and have them observe and report. Whatever's happening at the wall, we need to know. The North remembers, Cat, and what we remember is worth fearing." While the North whispered of strange warriors and ancient enemies, King's Landing buzzed with its own intrigues. In the Red Keep's throne room, King Robert Baratheon sat slouched on the Iron Throne, barely listening as his hand, Jon Arryn, discussed matters of state. The king's mind wandered to wine and women, to anything but the tedious business of ruling. But in the shadows, Varys the Spider listened to everything. After the court session, Varys glided through secret passages to his chambers, where his little birds waited, children trained to observe and report, invisible in their poverty and insignificance. One had just returned from the north, carrying tales picked up from merchants and travelers. "The wall stirs," the child reported in a high, piping voice. "Rangers speak of a man who fell from the sky. They say he burns like fire and kills the ice demons. The Night's Watch keeps him close, but whispers spread." Varys gave the child a coin and dismissed them gently. Alone, he contemplated this information, a warrior appearing at the wall, just as the White Walkers, creatures most Southerners dismissed as myth, became active. Coincidence? Or the first move in a game whose rules he didn't yet understand? Knowledge was power, and this knowledge might prove valuable to the right buyer. But who? The king? Certainly not. Robert barely believed in the White Walkers, dismissing them as northern superstition. The Lannisters? Perhaps. but they were consumed with their own schemes for power. No, this information required careful handling. Varys filed it away, one more piece in the great game, waiting for the moment when it could be played to maximum effect. He did not yet know that the piece in question cared nothing for games, crowns, or thrones, that the warrior at the wall would burn through their carefully constructed intrigues like wildfire through dry grass if they made the mistake of standing between him and his goal. Back at Castle Black, Kratos spent his 3 days of waiting in constant motion. He trained rangers from dawn to dusk, sharing techniques that could be learned, demonstrating strategies that didn't rely on divine strength. The men absorbed his lessons with desperate intensity. They could feel winter's advance, sense the gathering storm beyond the wall. On the second day, a young ranger named Gren approached hesitantly during a break. He was broad-shouldered and simple-faced, more strength than grace, the kind of warrior who relied on determination rather than skill. Could you show me that move again? Gren asked, fumbling with his practice sword. The one where you redirect their strength? I'm not fast like the others, but I'm strong. If I could use an enemy's power against them. Kratos studied the young man, seeing something of his younger self, a warrior who understood his limitations and sought to overcome them through learning rather than complaint. Show me your stance. For the next hour, Kratos worked with Gren individually, breaking down the principles of leverage and momentum. Not divine power, but physics, using an opponent's strength against them, redirecting rather than opposing. It was the kind of technique that could mean the difference between life and death when facing superior enemies. You have potential, Kratos said finally, and the young ranger's face lit up with pride. You think like a survivor, not a hero? That will keep you alive longer. Thank you, Gren said earnestly. We all thought, when you first arrived, we thought you were another Benjen Stark. You know, someone who'd disappear beyond the wall and never return. But you came back. You're teaching us. He struggled for words. You're giving us a chance. Kratos said nothing, but something tightened in his chest. These men reminded him of Spartans, outnumbered, outmatched, fighting anyway because someone had to stand against the darkness. He'd walked away from such duty once, abandoned Sparta for selfish vengeance. Perhaps this was a chance to do better, or perhaps he was simply delaying the inevitable moment when he'd leave them all behind to find his son. On the third day, Corin assembled the expedition. He'd chosen 3 rangers: Stone Snake, a wiry climber known for navigating treacherous terrain; Dalbridge, a veteran archer who'd ranged farther north than almost anyone alive; and Eben, a silent tracker who could read signs in snow that others couldn't see. All 3 were legends among the Watch, men who'd survived impossible odds through skill and luck in equal measure. We travel light and fast, Corin explained, spreading a rough map across the table in Mormont's solar. North through the haunted forest, then northeast toward the Frostfangs. We beyond that, he trailed off, finger hovering over blank parchment. No one's mapped that territory. We're relying on welling tales and legend. The three-eyed crow is said to live in a cave protected by the children of the forest, Maester Aemon added, his blind eyes somehow conveying concern. But the exact location is unknown. You'll be searching for something that may not exist in territory controlled by the White Walkers. Not the first time, Eben muttered, his first words since entering the room. Lord Commander Mormont sat heavily in his chair, looking every year of his age. This is a fool's errand. I should forbid it. But his eyes moved to Kratos, and something in that gaze acknowledged reality. But if our best chance against the White Walkers disappears into the wilderness without support, we lose regardless. Or at least this way, Corin can try to bring you back alive. We leave at dawn, Corin said. 5 men against the long night. It'll make a good song if anyone survives to sing it. I will survive, Kratos said with absolute certainty, and I will find the way home to my son. Nothing in this realm will stop me. The Rangers exchanged glances, not mockery, but the look of men who'd learned to take such certainty seriously. They'd seen what Kratos could do. If anyone could survive the journey north, it was the ghost of Sparta. That night, Kratos stood one last time atop the wall, staring into the northern darkness. Tomorrow would begin the true test, a journey into lands of ice and death, seeking knowledge from a legend that might not exist, all to return to a son in another realm entirely. The odds were impossible. The danger was absolute. And the likelihood of success was minimal. None of it mattered. Atreus was out there, somewhere across the dimensional void, and Kratos would cross any distance, survive any trial, destroy any obstacle to reach him. That was what fathers did. That was what he should have done from the beginning, before the gods twisted his love into weapons, before Ares made him a monster. "I have failed you before, boy," Kratos whispered to the frozen wind, "but I will not fail you now. Wait for me. Have faith in your father, as I have faith in you." Below in the courtyard, Corin and his rangers made final preparations. Supplies were packed, weapons checked, routes memorized. They knew this might be their last ranging, that the lands beyond the haunted forest had claimed better men than they. But the Night's Watch didn't exist to take safe paths. They existed to stand watch in the darkness, to face what must be faced, and now they would face it alongside a warrior who'd killed gods. In the haunted forest, the Night King felt the stirring of purpose from Castle Black. 5 men preparing to venture deep into his domain, seeking something ancient and powerful. The God Killer and his mortal companions, walking willingly into the heart of Winter's kingdom. Interesting. The Night King gestured, and White Walkers responded to silent commands. Let them come north. Let them seek their three-eyed crow. Let them believe they could find answers and escape unscathed. The long night was patient. It had waited 8,000 years. It could wait a few more days while prey walked into the trap of their own accord. Besides, the Night King was curious. This Kratos had destroyed 8 of his lieutenants with contemptuous ease. But how would he fare when the full weight of winter descended? When not 8 White Walkers attacked, but 80? When the dead rose in thousands? When the cold itself became a weapon? When hope froze solid in the chest? Every warrior had a breaking point, even gods. The Night King would find Kratos' breaking point, would study it, analyze it, exploit it. And when the God Killer finally fell, and he would fall, they always did, the Night King would raise him as the ultimate white, a warrior who'd killed gods, now serving death itself. The symmetry was appealing. Dawn came cold and gray over Castle Black. In the courtyard, 5 figures prepared to leave. 4 rangers clad in black, carrying supplies and weapons honed by centuries of watch tradition, and 1 warrior dressed in leather and ash, carrying chains that had tasted the blood of Olympus. Lord Commander Mormont watched them with the expression of a man sending sons to probable death. "The Watch thanks you for your service," he said formally. "May the old gods watch over you." "May the warrior give them strength," Meister Eamon added, his blind eyes somehow fixed on Kratos. "And may you find what you seek, stranger, from another realm. Find it, and return to tell the tale." Kratos nodded once. No promises, no false reassurances. He would find the three-eyed crow or die trying. There was no middle ground. The gates of Castle Black opened, revealing the north in all its frozen hostility. Beyond lay the haunted forest, the frost fangs, the lands of eternal winter. Beyond lay White Walkers and Whites, ice and death, darkness that had ended entire civilizations. Beyond lay answers and hope. Kratos stepped through the gates without hesitation, and the rangers followed. The gates closed behind them with the finality of a tomb ceiling. The journey to the heart of winter had begun, and in both the realms of the living and the dead, forces ancient and terrible turned their attention north, sensing that something significant was in motion. The Game of Thrones continued in King's Landing, but the true battle, the one that would determine the fate of all life, was about to unfold in the frozen wastes where no crown held meaning, where only strength, determination, and a father's love would matter. The haunted forest earned its name. 3 days north of the wall, Kratos understood why even hardened rangers spoke of these woods in whispers. The trees were ancient beyond measure, massive sentinels of dark wood and frozen needles that blocked out what little sun penetrated the gray sky. Snow fell constantly, muffling sound until the world became a tomb of white silence. And everywhere, carved into the bone-pale weirwoods scattered throughout the forest, faces watched with wooden eyes that seemed to track their movement. "The old gods see everything here," Dalbridge murmured, making a sign against evil as they passed another heart tree. My grandmother said the children of the forest carved these faces so the gods could watch over the first men. But she also said the gods don't always like what they see. Kratos studied the nearest face, its mouth open in a silent scream, red sap frozen like blood tears on white bark. He'd known gods who watched mortals with such expressions: hunger, judgment, cruel amusement. These faces held something different, sorrow perhaps, or warning. "Keep moving," Corin ordered quietly, his breath creating small clouds in the bitter air. "We're making good time, but we're still 2 weeks from the Frost Fangs at this pace, and the deeper we go, the more dangerous it becomes." They traveled in practiced formation, Stone Snake scouting ahead, using his climbing skills to scale trees and survey the terrain. Eben reading tracks in the snow with uncanny precision, Dalbridge watching their rear with an arrow perpetually nocked, Corin leading, and Kratos moving like a shadow among them, silent despite his size. The Rangers had expected the stranger to slow them down, to require teaching in woodcraft and survival. Instead, they found themselves struggling to match his pace. Kratos moved through the forest with the efficiency of a predator, wasting no energy, making no unnecessary sound. When they made camp, he required no fire for warmth, no shelter from the wind. He simply existed in the cold as if it were nothing. "It's unnatural," Dalbridge muttered on the fourth night, huddled close to their small, carefully concealed fire. "A man should feel the cold, should need rest. But him?" He gestured to where Kratos sat apart, keeping watch with eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. "It's like he's carved from the same stone as the wall itself." "He killed 8 White Walkers," Stone Snake pointed out, warming his hands. "I'll take unnatural on our side over natural on theirs." Eben said nothing, but his eyes tracked Kratos with the wariness of a man who'd learned to recognize apex predators. Whatever Kratos was, he existed outside normal classifications of threat. He was simply other. On the 5th day, they found the first bodies, wildlings, a dozen of them, frozen in positions that suggested they'd been running. Their eyes were open, mouths stretched in silent screams, skin blue-white with cold. But there were no wounds, no blood, no obvious cause of death beyond the temperature itself. "White Walkers were here," Corin said grimly, examining the scene. "See how the snow's been disturbed? And these tracks, inhuman spacing, too precise to be natural." He stood, scanning the surrounding trees. "They're watching us, testing, trying to decide if we're worth the effort to kill." "Let them come," Kratos said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute confidence. "I welcome the opportunity." "That's the problem," Corin replied sharply. "You might welcome it, but we're not you. A fight with White Walkers means some of us die, maybe all of us. We're here to reach the three-eyed crow, not to wage war with the dead." Kratos met the Ranger's gaze, recognizing the truth in his words. These men were brave, skilled, but ultimately mortal. They couldn't survive what he could, and he'd promised himself, after Sparta, after Olympus, after everything, that he would try to protect the innocent, not lead them to pointless death. "We avoid engagement when possible," Kratos agreed, the concession clearly difficult. "But if they force confrontation, then you do what you do best," Corin finished. "And we try to stay alive long enough to watch." They moved faster after that, pushing through exhaustion, driven by the knowledge that the dead were aware of their presence. The forest grew darker, the cold more intense, the silence more oppressive. Even the birds had fled this deep wilderness. Only the screaming wind through frozen branches broke the quiet. On the 7th day, they reached the edge of the haunted forest and stood before the Frost Fangs. The mountain range rose like broken teeth against the gray sky, jagged peaks of ice and stone that stretched impossibly high, disappearing into frozen clouds. No paths were visible, no obvious route through the treacherous terrain. Just endless walls of ice, crevasses deep enough to swallow castles, and winds that howled like dying gods. "Beyond those mountains," Corin said, a voice nearly lost in the wind, "is territory no ranger has mapped and returned from. We're guessing from here, following wildling tales and legend. The cave of the three-eyed crow is supposed to be north of the mountains," Stone Snake added, squinting at the peaks. "But which pass to take, how far beyond, What landmarks to follow? He shook his head. We're hunting shadows. Then we search until we find them. Kratos stated simply. I have crossed greater obstacles. These mountains are nothing. These mountains have killed better men than us, Eben said quietly. Rare words from the silent tracker. Avalanches, ice falls, storms that freeze flesh in minutes, crevasses hidden under snow that drop for 1,000 feet. His eyes fixed on Kratos. You might survive. We won't. Kratos considered this. He could continue alone, not faster and without concern for mortal limitations. But the Rangers knew this land in ways he didn't. Could read weather signs, identify safe ice, navigate by stars and landmarks. Their knowledge balanced his power. Then we use caution, Kratos said finally. Stone Snake scout safe routes. We rope together when crossing dangerous terrain. We move during daylight only, shelter at night. Slow but alive. Corin nodded approvingly. Learning to value other men's lives. There might be hope for you yet, God Killer. They spent that night in a cave at the mountain's base, huddled around a fire that Dalbridge nursed with precious fuel. Outside, wind screamed across the peaks with fury that suggested something sentient and angry. The Rangers told stories to pass the time. Tales of legendary Rangers, of battles beyond the wall, chivalry of the Night's Watch in its glory days when 10,000 men held the wall. Corin, Kratos said during a lull, his rough voice drawing attention. Why do you serve the Watch? You have skill enough to be a lord, to claim lands and wealth. Yet you remain here, fighting impossible battles for people who've forgotten you exist. The Ranger was silent for a long moment, firelight casting harsh shadows across his weathered face. I had a brother, he said finally. Younger, stronger, more handsome. Everything I wasn't. He was meant to inherit our father's lands, take a wife, continue the family name. Corin stared into the flames. The White Walkers killed him on his first ranging, took his body, raised him as a white. I had to put him down myself. My own brother walking dead. Ari with those blue eyes looking at me without recognition. The cave was utterly silent except for the wind outside. After that, I understood, Corin continued. The wall isn't about glory or recognition. It's about standing between the darkness and everything we love. My brother died so that children in Winterfell could sleep safely, so that farmers in the Reach could plant crops without fear, so that the whole bloody realm could play their games of thrones without the dead knocking on their doors. He looked up, meeting Kratos' gaze. That's why we serve, because someone has to, and we've already lost everything that might make us turn away. Kratos understood that logic intimately. He too had lost everything. Family, home, purpose. And like these Rangers, he'd found something in service to others. Not redemption, perhaps, but meaning. Yeah, your brother would be proud, Kratos said quietly. Maybe, Corin replied. Or maybe he'd call me a fool for staying. Either way, he's dead, and I'm here. That's all that matters. They slept in shifts that night, the fire burning low, the wind screaming warnings they couldn't decipher. And far above them, on the highest peak of the Frost Fangs, the Night King stood like a statue of frozen death, watching the small fire glow far below. 5 men climbing into his domain, 1 warrior who'd killed gods, 4 mortals who knew they would die but came anyway. The determination was admirable. In another age, such warriors might have been turned, recruited, elevated to White Walkers themselves rather than simple whites. But the Night King had learned patience over 8,000 years. These 5 would serve his purpose regardless of their intentions. They sought the 3-eyed crow? Good. Let them find him. Let them discover what ancient knowledge the Green Seer possessed. Let them believe they could learn the way home for the God-Killer's son. And when they'd served their purpose, when they'd led the Night King to the last Green Seer, when they'd exhausted their usefulness, then the Long Night would claim them all. The Night King raised one hand, and from the frozen peaks his army responded. White Walkers began their descent, moving with eerie purpose. Not to attack, not yet, but to follow, to watch, to wait for the perfect moment to strike. Because the Night King had learned something important about the God Killer during their previous encounter. Kratos fought with absolute commitment, with divine power that could shatter White Walkers like glass. But he also cared about the mortals with him, cared about protecting them, keeping them alive. And care was vulnerability. Love was weakness. The need to protect others would be the God-killer's undoing. The Night King could be patient. Winter was eternal. And eventually Kratos would face an impossible choice: save himself and abandon his mortal companions, or stay and die defending those too weak to matter. The Night King already knew which choice the God-killer would make. Warriors like him always chose the same way, and it always led to the same end: death. Dawn broke gray and cold over the Frost Fangs. The 5 Rangers prepared to climb, checking ropes and gear with the thoroughness of men who understood that every detail meant life or death. Kratos stood apart, staring up at the peaks that disappeared into frozen clouds. Somewhere beyond those mountains, the three-eyed crow waited. Somewhere beyond, answers existed. Somewhere beyond, he would find the way home to Atreus. Nothing would stop him. Not mountains, not cold, not the army of the dead that even now descended from the peaks, moving to intercept, to test, to ultimately destroy. The climb began in silence, 5 figures against the vast, white nothing, ascending toward mysteries and dangers they couldn't yet imagine. Behind them, the haunted forest faded into distance. Ahead, the heart of winter waited with ancient hunger and infinite patience. And in another realm, impossibly far away, a boy looked north and wondered if his father still lived, still searched, still fought to return. The answer was yes, always yes. Because Kratos was many things: God-killer, monster, warrior, destroyer of pantheons. But above all, he was a father. And fathers never stopped fighting for their sons. Never. The crossing of the Frost Fangs took 11 days of brutal labor that tested even Kratos' resolve. Stone Snake led, finding paths where none seemed to exist. Narrow ledges barely wide enough for single file. Ice bridges spanning crevasses that dropped into darkness. Slopes so steep they required ropes and iron spikes driven into frozen stone. The Rangers moved with practiced caution, each step calculated, each handhold tested. One mistake meant death, and the mountains offered countless opportunities for mistakes. On the 3rd day, Dalbridge nearly fell when an ice shelf collapsed beneath his feet. Only Kratos' inhuman reflexes saved him. The God-killer's hand shooting out faster than mortal eyes could follow, catching the Ranger's wrist, pulling him back from the abyss. Dalbridge dangled for a heartbeat over a drop that disappeared into shadow. Then Kratos hauled him back to solid ground with effortless strength. "Gods!" Dalbridge gasped, clutching at ice. "I saw... There's no bottom. That crevasse just goes down forever." "Stay focused," Corin ordered, though his voice carried relief. "We lose one man, we lose all advantage. Keep moving, but keep thinking." The cold intensified as they climbed higher. At night, temperatures plummeted to levels that should have killed them in hours. The Rangers huddled together in small caves or behind ice shelters they carved from frozen walls, sharing body heat, burning their precious fuel in desperate attempts to stay warm. Kratos sat apart, seemingly immune, his divine nature protecting him from temperatures that would have frozen mortal blood solid. "How?" Eben asked one night, the single word carrying volumes of confusion and envy. Kratos understood the question. "I am not like you. The cold cannot kill what is already beyond mortal limits." He paused, something softening in his expression. "But I remember being mortal. Remember when cold like this would have meant death. Do not think I failed to respect your endurance." "Endurance," Stone Snake laughed bitterly, teeth chattering despite the small fire. "Is that what we're calling slowly freezing to death? You could have stayed at Castle Black," Kratos pointed out. "Warm beds, hot food, safety behind the wall. Yet you came anyway. Knowing the danger. That is courage beyond what most gods I've known possessed." The Rangers fell silent, absorbing this. Praise from the God-killer carried weight. He didn't offer false comfort or meaningless platitudes. If he said they showed courage, he meant it. "Tell us more about your son," Dalbridge said suddenly, seeking distraction from the cold. "What's he like? Worth all this?" Kratos was quiet for so long they thought he wouldn't answer. Then in a voice rough with emotion, rarely shown, "Atreus is everything I am not. kind where I am harsh, hopeful where I am cynical. He sees good in the world despite everything I've taught him about its cruelty. He stared into the fire. He makes me want to be better than what I am, better than the monster I was. For his sake, I am trying to become the father he deserves. Sounds like a good boy, Corin said quietly. He is the best of me and his mother both. Every sacrifice, every struggle, it means nothing if I cannot return to him, cannot protect him, cannot be what he needs. Kratos' hands clenched. I have failed everyone I ever loved. I will not fail him. The conviction in those words carried such weight that the Rangers felt it like physical pressure. This wasn't hope or determination. This was absolute certainty, the kind that reshaped reality through sheer force of will. On the 7th day of climbing, they found the corpses. The bodies were frozen in ice, preserved perfectly, wildlings by their dress. 3 men and 2 women, all dead for what might have been days or decades in these temperatures. They died in a cluster, backs pressed together, a weapons out, defending against something that had come from all sides. White Walkers, Corin identified immediately. Look at their faces, terror frozen in place. They saw death coming and knew they couldn't stop it. Recent, Eben added, studying the scene with his tracker's eye. Snow hasn't covered them yet, maybe 2, 3 days old. So the dead are ahead of us, Dalbridge muttered, checking his dragonglass arrows nervously. Waiting. They've been watching us since the haunted forest, Kratos said, his gray eyes scanning the peaks above. I can feel their presence, like weight pressing on the air. They're following, waiting for something. For what? Stone Snake asked. For the right moment to attack, Corin answered grimly. They're predators, not mindless killers. They choose their battles, strike when they have advantage. Right now, we're in their territory, exhausted, exposed. If they wanted us dead, we'd be dead. So why aren't we? Dalbridge demanded. Kratos understood before the others. Because they want to see where we're going, what we're seeking. The three-eyed crow must matter to them. They want us to lead them to him. Which means when we find the cave, Corin concluded darkly, they'll attack in force, not to kill us quickly, but to ensure we can't escape with whatever knowledge we gain. The Rangers absorbed this with the grim acceptance of men who'd always known they were riding toward death. The Night's Watch didn't promise long life or glory, just the chance to die in service of something greater. They climbed on. On the 9th day, Stone Snake found the pass, a narrow cut between 2 massive peaks, barely wide enough for single file, that led down the northern slope of the Frostfangs. Beyond, the land opened into a vast frozen wasteland that stretched to the horizon, white and featureless except for distant dark shapes that might have been forests or mountains. The land of always winter, Corin breathed, staring at the view. The heart of their kingdom, where the White Walkers were born, according to legend. And where the three-eyed crow supposedly hides, Stone Snake added. Somewhere out there, in a cave protected by magic, if we believe the stories. We've come too far to doubt now, Kratos said, starting down the northern slope. The descent was faster but more treacherous. Ice gave way to sudden slides. Avalanches threatened with every step. The wind screamed with renewed fury, as if trying to push them back. Twice, rockfalls nearly buried them. Once, Eben broke through what appeared to be solid ice into a hidden stream beneath, the freezing water nearly dragging him under, before Kratos pulled him free. On the 11th day, they reached the base of the mountains and stood in the land of always winter. It was worse than any of them had imagined. The temperature was so cold that breath froze in midair, falling as ice crystals. Exposed skin developed frostbite in seconds. The landscape was a nightmare of frozen plains broken by jagged ice formations that rose like frozen waves. In the distance, massive structures of ice reached toward the gray sky. Palaces or fortresses built by hands that were not human. Architecture of angles that hurt to look at. Beauty and horror frozen in eternal stillness. The White Walkers' citadels, Dalbridge whispered, horrified fascination in his voice. Gods, they really do have a kingdom, a civilization. And we just walked into its capital, Corrin added grimly. From here on, we're in their world completely. No escape, no safety, just ice and death in every direction. The cave, Kratos insisted, refusing to be deterred. Where is the cave? Eben studied the landscape with his tracker's precision, then pointed northeast. Wildling tales spoke of a cave beneath a great weirwood that had grown into a hill. The only living thing in the land of always winter, protected by old magic. If we're going to find it... He trailed off, clearly doubting their chances. They moved northeast, walking through frozen hell. The land fought them with every step. Ice broke beneath their feet, revealing pools of water so cold it burned like fire. The wind carried voices, whispers in languages none of them recognized, promises and threats that seemed to come from the ice itself. Shapes moved in the distance, tall figures of white and blue that paralleled their path but never approached. White walkers, dozens of them, watching, waiting, following. They're hurting us, Corrin realized on the second day in the wasteland, pushing us towards something, away from certain paths toward others. Toward the cave, Kratos said. They want us to find it, want to see what happens when we arrive. Then it's a trap, Stone Snake stated flatly. All of this has been a trap, Corrin replied. We knew that from the start. The question is, do we spring it anyway? 4 pairs of eyes turned to Kratos. This was his quest, his need driving them into this frozen hell. The decision should be his. Kratos thought of Atreus, thought of his son waiting, wondering if his father still searched, thought of the promise he'd made, that nothing would stop him, no danger too great, no sacrifice unworthy. We continue, he said simply. I will face whatever waits at the cave. If you wish to turn back... We're already dead if we turn back, Corrin interrupted. The White Walkers would run us down before we reach the mountains. Our only chance is forward. Find the cave, get our answers, and hope the old magic protects us long enough to matter. Not much of a plan, Dalbridge muttered. Never was, Eben agreed. On the 3rd day in the land of always winter, they found it. A great weirwood tree, impossibly alive in this frozen wasteland. Its bone-white trunk twisted and ancient, its red leaves somehow not frozen despite the temperature. It had grown into and over a hill, roots spreading like grasping fingers, and at the base, half hidden by those roots, was a cave mouth. Darkness beckoned from within, and from that darkness came something that made even Kratos pause. Power, old power. Magic that predated kingdoms and kings, that existed when the first men still fought the children of the forest, when the long night first fell, and heroes rose to drive it back. The three-eyed crow, Corrin breathed. He's real. By all the gods, he's actually real. But surrounding the hill, standing in a perfect circle just beyond the weirwood's reach, were White Walkers. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, their numbers disappearing into the frozen mists. They stood motionless, ice swords drawn, watching with those terrible blue eyes. And at their center, yes, directly between the rangers and the cave, stood a figure that made the others seem insignificant. The Night King, taller than the other White Walkers, crowned with twisted horns of ice, clad in armor that seemed forged from frozen starlight and ancient malice. His eyes burned with cold blue fire that held intelligence, calculation, and something that might have been cruel amusement. He'd been waiting for them, had herded them here, let them exhaust themselves, brought them to the one place in his kingdom where old magic might protect them, because he wanted to see what would happen, wanted to watch the god killer and the three-eyed crow meet, wanted to observe, to learn, to understand, and when he'd learned enough, he would attack, not just to kill, but to take, to add the god killer to his army, to claim the three-eyed crow's knowledge, and to end the last resistance to the long night's return. The trap had sprung, and they were at its center. Kratos stepped forward, the blades of chaos materializing in his hands with divine fire that pushed back the cold. Behind him, the 4 rangers drew their weapons, dragon glass and steel, pathetic compared to what they faced, but all they had. Kratos, Corrin said quietly, acceptance heavy in his voice. It's been an honor. This is not your end, Kratos replied, not taking his eyes off the Night King. Get to the cave. Seek your three-eyed crow. I will hold them." "You can't fight them all," Dalbridge protested. "I have fought pantheons," Kratos said, divine power building around him like heat shimmer. "I have brought down Olympus itself. These creatures, ancient as they are not gods. But there are hundreds. Then hundreds will fall." Kratos began walking toward the Night King, each step melting the ice beneath his feet. "I am Kratos, the ghost of Sparta, the god killer. I have torn down heaven. I have walked through death itself. I have destroyed everything that stood between me and my son." His voice rose to a roar that echoed across the frozen wasteland. "I am a father seeking his child, and nothing in any realm will stop me." The blades of chaos ignited with fire hot enough to turn the air itself into plasma. Kratos' skin blazed with the red energy of Spartan rage, and for just a moment, he was what he'd been at his peak, the god of war incarnate, wreathed in divine fury, unstoppable and absolute. The White Walkers hesitated. Even the Night King seemed to reassess. Go! Kratos roared at the Rangers. And then he charged, alone against an army, toward the creature that had brought the long night, in a frozen wasteland at the edge of the world. Behind him, the 4 Rangers ran for the cave, tears freezing on their cheeks, knowing they would never see the god killer alive again. Knowing that his sacrifice was giving them the only chance they'd ever have. Kratos collided with the White Walker army like a meteor striking ice. The first line shattered before him, literally. Divine fire met ancient cold in an explosion of steam and power that sent frozen shrapnel flying in every direction. White Walkers raised their ice swords to defend, but the blades of chaos carved through them with contemptuous ease, the weapons that had killed gods finding these ancient creatures to be little more than obstacles. The 3 White Walkers disintegrated in the first seconds, 5 more in the next. The chains whipped and extended, wrapping around frozen throats, pulling enemies into range, the blades spinning in arcs of flame that left nothing but melting ice in their wake. But there were so many. For every White Walker that fell, 2 more took its place. They attacked with perfect coordination, centuries of combat experience guiding their movements, ice swords striking from multiple angles simultaneously. They were fast, faster than any mortal, faster than most gods Kratos had fought. Their strength was immense, each blow carrying enough force to shatter stone. Against any normal warrior, they would have been overwhelming. But Kratos was far from normal. He moved through their ranks like death itself, the blades of chaos singing their song of destruction. A White Walker lunged from his left. Kratos caught its sword on his chain, jerked it off balance, his other blade removing its head. 2 attacked from behind. He spun, chains extending impossibly, fire trailing in burning spirals that reduced both to fragments. A massive White Walker, ancient and powerful, brought its ice sword down in an overhead strike that would have split a mountain. Kratos sidestepped, let the blade sink into frozen ground, then drove both his weapons through the creature's chest. The battle became a storm of ice and fire, of divine fury against ancient malice. Kratos' Spartan rage burned hotter with each moment, divine power channeled through mortal determination. He wasn't fighting for glory or vengeance now. He was fighting for time. Time for the Rangers to reach the cave, to find the 3-eyed crow, but to discover the knowledge that might lead him home. He was fighting as a father, and nothing in any realm could match that desperation. Behind the fighting, Corrin and his 3 Rangers ran through the circle of White Walkers, the creatures paying them no attention, all focused on the god killer who was decimating their ranks. The Rangers reached the weirwood's roots, stumbling toward the cave entrance with exhausted desperation. "Inside!" Corrin shouted, practically throwing Dalbridge through the opening. "The old magic should protect us once we're—" A presence stopped them cold. The cave was vast, far larger than the entrance suggested, stretching back into darkness that seemed to go on forever. But near the entrance, illuminated by pale light that came from no visible source, sat a figure that defied understanding. An ancient man, or what had once been a man, sat upon a throne of weirwood roots. The roots had grown through him, into him, around him, until it was impossible to tell where tree ended and flesh began. His skin was pale as the weirwood bark, his hair white and long, flowing down to merge with the roots themselves. One eye was missing, the socket empty and dark. The other eye was red as the weirwood leaves, and in that eye was knowledge. Vast, terrible, beautiful knowledge that spanned millennia. The three-eyed crow, Corin whispered, falling to his knees from exhaustion and awe. I have been waiting, the ancient figure said, his voice like wind through dry leaves, like whispers through time itself. I have seen you coming, seen all the paths that led here, all the choices made, not all the futures branching from this moment. That single red eye fixed on them. I am Brynden. Some call me Blood Raven. Others call me the Three-Eyed Raven. I am the last green seer, bound to this tree for 1,000 years, watching the world through the eyes of crows and weirwoods. The God Killer, Eben managed, gasping for breath. He's fighting them all, buying us time. I know what you need, Brynden interrupted, his gaze distant as if seeing through multiple realities simultaneously. The warrior Kratos seeks the way home to his son. He believes I have answers. The ancient green seer's expression was sorrowful. And I do, but the price of those answers is higher than any of you can imagine. Outside, the battle reached new heights of violence. Kratos had destroyed dozens of White Walkers, but the army pressed in from all sides. Ice swords caught him across the ribs, the shoulder, the thigh, wounds that would have killed any mortal but only enraged him further. His Spartan rage burned hotter, the divine fire turning snow to steam for 100 feet in every direction. But the Night King had not moved. He stood beyond the battle, watching, learning, studying every technique, every pattern, every moment of weakness. The ancient enemy was patient, and he understood something the God Killer had not yet realized. This battle could not be won, not by strength alone. In the cave, Brynden spoke rapidly, his words carrying the weight of prophecy and terrible necessity. The warrior who fell into your world is not here by accident. The gods, your old gods, his gods, the force that connects all realms, brought him here for a purpose. The long night returns, and with it comes death for all living things. The Night King seeks to erase all life, all memory, all meaning from existence. He is the antithesis of everything that lives and loves and remembers. Then Kratos is here to fight him? Dalbridge asked hopefully. To kill the Night King like he killed the White Walkers? No, Brynden said, sorrow deepening. Kratos cannot kill the Night King. The ancient enemy is not a god he can simply destroy. He is death itself given form, powered by magic older than civilization. To defeat him requires something the God Killer does not possess. What? Corin demanded. What does he need? Sacrifice, Brynden whispered. True sacrifice. The kind that gives everything without guarantee of return. His red eye seemed to pierce through them. Kratos has power beyond measure, but he fights for himself, for his son, for his own purpose. Such fighting, however fierce, cannot overcome the Night King. Only those who sacrifice for others, who give their lives knowing they will never see what they've saved, can push back the darkness. Then we're doomed, Stone Snake said flatly, because that warrior out there won't sacrifice himself for strangers. He said it himself. He'll leave the moment he finds a way home, regardless of what we face. Yes, Brynden agreed. And that is precisely why the magic that brought him here gave him no choice but to care. The Green Seer's gaze grew distant again, seeing through time. Do you not understand? Kratos was sent to a realm where he would bond with warriors like himself, men fighting hopeless battles for causes greater than themselves. He was sent to the Night's Watch, arena where honor and sacrifice are not just words but reality. He was forced to care about the Rangers, to see in them the courage he once possessed and lost. Corin understood first. You're saying the gods wanted him to learn from us? To remember what it means to fight for others? I am saying the gods gave him a chance to be more than a god killer, a chance to be a hero. Brynden leaned forward, roots creaking. And now comes the choice. I can tell him how to return home. The magic exists, the path can be found. But if he leaves now, the Night King will sweep across Westeros and millions will die. Or what? Corin pressed. Or he can choose to stay, to fight not for himself, but for a world that is not his own. to sacrifice his chance of reunion with his son in order to give this realm a fighting chance against the darkness. Brendan's voice carried infinite sadness. That is the answer I must give him, the choice that will define whether he remains a god killer or becomes something greater. Outside, Kratos roared his fury at the sky. He'd destroyed 50 White Walkers, maybe more, but they kept coming. His divine power was beginning to flag, not exhausted, but straining against the sheer volume of enemies. Ice swords had scored dozens of wounds, and even his godly healing couldn't keep pace with the damage. Worse, the Night King was advancing now, having learned what he needed to know. The ancient enemy moved with terrible purpose, ice sword raised, ready to personally end this battle. In the cave, when the four rangers looked at each other with the knowledge of doomed men. "He won't choose sacrifice," Dalbridge said quietly. "Not for us. Not for a world he doesn't care about. His son means everything to him." "Maybe," Corin said slowly. "Or maybe," he looked at Brendan. "Tell him the truth. Give him the choice. Let the god killer decide what kind of man or god he wants to be." "And if he chooses to leave?" Stone Snake asked. "If he takes the knowledge and abandons us?" "Then we die knowing we gave him the chance to be better," Corin replied. "And we die on our feet, fighting the darkness, like every ranger before us. The Night's Watch doesn't exist because we expect to win. We exist because someone has to stand watch, even when standing means dying." Brendan nodded slowly. "Then I will tell him, when he comes to me, and he will come, and I have seen it, I will give him the choice. Stay and fight for a world not his own, or take the knowledge and return to his son." The ancient green seer's voice dropped to a whisper. "But know this, if he chooses himself, if he chooses his own happiness over the lives of millions, I will not judge him. What right do gods or men have to demand a father abandon his child?" The question hung unanswered in the air. Outside, Kratos faced the Night King. The battle had carved a circle of scorched earth in the frozen wasteland. Dozens of shattered White Walkers scattered like broken glass. Kratos stood at the center, breathing heavily, divine fire burning lower, but not extinguished, the blades of chaos still firmly in his grip. The Night King approached with unhurried steps, ice sword held casually, blue eyes burning with cold intelligence. Around them, the remaining White Walkers drew back, forming a ring to watch this confrontation. "You are strong," the Night King said, his voice like breaking ice, speaking for the first time. "Stronger than any I have faced in 8,000 years. You have killed gods, destroyed pantheons. You are a weapon beyond mortal reckoning." Kratos said nothing, simply watching, waiting. "But you fight alone," the Night King continued. "You fight for yourself, for your own purpose, and such fighting has limits. You tire, you bleed, you will eventually fall." He gestured with his ice sword toward the cave. "Your rangers run to the Green Seer, seeking answers. Will you find what you seek, God Killer? Will you learn the way home to your son?" "Yes," Kratos growled. "Ha, and nothing you say will stop me." The Night King's expression might have been a smile, if frozen death could smile. "I do not need to stop you. I need only make you choose." He raised his sword, and around them, the frozen ground began to crack and heave. "You can fight me now, exhaust yourself trying to destroy what cannot be destroyed, and die before learning anything. Or you can run to your cave, gain your answers, and face a different death. The death of knowing you could have stayed and fought, but chose yourself instead." Bodies erupted from the ice. Whites by the hundreds, maybe thousands, all the dead claimed by winter over 8,000 years. They rose with jerky movements, empty eyes, and grasping hands. An army of corpses, all focused on one target, Kratos. "Choose, God Killer," the Night King commanded. "Die fighting meaninglessly here, or run to your answers and live with the knowledge that you abandoned those who fought beside you." For just a moment, the briefest instant, Kratos hesitated. In that hesitation, he thought of Atreus, thought of his son waiting, wondering, perhaps believing his father had abandoned him. Thought of the promise he'd made, that nothing would stop him, no sacrifice too great. And he thought of Corin, speaking of his dead brother, of Gren, learning to fight with simple determination, of the Night's Watch, standing against impossible darkness because someone had to. He thought of who he'd been, the monster who destroyed Olympus for personal vengeance, and who he'd tried to become for his son's sake. The choice crystallized with terrible clarity. Kratos turned and ran for the cave. Behind him, the Night King's army followed like a frozen tsunami, death given form and purpose. Thousands of corpses surging forward with singular focus. And ahead, in a cave beneath a weirwood tree, an ancient green seer waited to deliver news that would shatter a god-killer's world. The climax approached. The choice would be made, and nothing in Westeros or beyond would ever be the same. Kratos burst into the cave as the White Army crashed against the weirwood's roots like a frozen wave against stone. The ancient magic held, barely. Corpses clawed at invisible barriers, their desperate scratching echoing through the cavern, but they could not enter. Not yet. The god-killer stood in the pale light, breathing heavily for the first time in years, divine power flickering like a guttering torch. Blood, his own, dripped from dozens of wounds. The blades of chaos still burned in his hands, but the fire was dimmer now, exhausted by the battle that should have killed any mortal 100 times over. His gray eyes found the four rangers first: Corrin, Eben, Stone Snake, Dalbridge, all alive, all watching him with expressions that mixed relief and sorrow in equal measure. Then his gaze shifted to the throne of roots and the ancient figure bound within. "Kratos," Brynden said, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 years. "The god-killer who seeks his son. I have waited for you, seen every path that brought you here, every choice that led to this moment." The red eye gleamed with terrible knowledge. "You wish to know the way home to your realm, to your boy. And I can tell you, the magic exists, ere the path can be found." Hope, sharp and painful as a blade, pierced through Kratos' chest. "Tell me. But first you must understand what your choice will mean," Brynden continued, unmoved by the desperation in Kratos' voice. "Sit. Listen. For what I show you will change everything." "I have no time for," Kratos began, but Brynden's eye flashed, and suddenly the god-killer was elsewhere. A vision forced into his mind with irresistible power. He saw the long night sweep across Westeros like death-given form. The wall fell, its ancient magic failing, 700 feet of ice collapsing into ruin. Castle Black burned with blue flames. The Night's Watch died to the last man, raised as whites, their black cloaks turned to frozen shrouds. He saw the north consumed, Winterfell's walls breached, the Stark children cut down as they fled. The crypts opened, ancient Stark kings rising as corpses, killing their own descendants. Every village, every town, every city, all fell to the advancing cold. He saw King's Landing overrun, the great city with its million souls transformed into an army of the dead. The Iron Throne, that symbol of power and ambition, sat in a hall filled with frozen corpses. He saw the entire continent covered in winter. 7 kingdoms united only in death, all life extinguished, all warmth gone. The White Walkers stood victorious over a world of silent ice, having achieved what they'd sought for 8,000 years, the complete and utter annihilation of life itself. And through it all, through the slaughter and the silence, he saw himself, walking away from Castle Black, following the magical path home, returning to Atreus, alive, reunited, safe. Then while millions died, screaming, the vision ended and Kratos gasped, falling to his knees. The blades of chaos clattered against stone. "That is the future if you leave now," Brynden said quietly. "The Night King is too powerful for this realm alone to defeat. Their armies are divided, their heroes scattered, their magic faded. They need something they do not have, a warrior who has fought gods and won, a weapon forged in the death of pantheons." "You're asking me to stay," Kratos said, voice rough with emotion. "To abandon my son, to fight a battle that is not mine, for a world that means nothing to me." "Yes," Brynden admitted without shame or apology. "I am asking you to sacrifice everything you want, everything you fought for the sake of strangers who will never know your name. And I am asking you to be what the gods intended when they brought you here. Not a god killer, but a savior. Kratos stood slowly, every muscle in his body screaming protest. He turned to Corin and the Rangers, seeing in their faces the same impossible choice reflected back at him. "What would you do?" he asked the veteran ranger. "If your choice was between your brother, alive again, returned to you, or saving this realm?" Corin was silent for a long moment. Then, "My brother died so others could live. He made that choice himself, charging whites to buy his patrol time to escape. If he were alive now, he'd make the same choice again." The ranger's weathered face was carved from stone. "We all would. That's what the Watch means. We are the shield that guards the realms of men, and we don't get to choose personal happiness over duty." "But I am not Night's Watch," Kratos growled. "I swore no oath. I owe this realm nothing." "You're right," Corin agreed. "You owe us nothing. But your son, what would he want? If he were here, if he could see this vision, if he understood millions would die so his father could return, what would Atreus choose?" The question struck like a hammer blow. Kratos remembered his son's voice, remembered lessons taught beneath the world tree. "Father, we must be better, better than the gods, better than their cruelty. We must use our power to protect those who cannot protect themselves." Atreus would choose sacrifice, would tell his father to stay, to fight, to save innocent lives even at the cost of their reunion. Because that was who Atreus was, the best of his mother and father both, untainted by the rage and vengeance that had defined Kratos' life. And Kratos had promised to be better, to be the father Atreus deserved, to honor Faye's memory by becoming someone worthy of the love they'd given him. "There is another consideration," Brynden said, his voice gentle now. "If you return home and your son learns what you abandoned, learns that millions died because you chose him over them, it will break him. The guilt will destroy the very thing you're trying to protect. He will hate himself for being the reason you chose selfishly, and eventually he will hate you for making that choice." The truth of it resonated through Kratos' soul like a bell tolling. Atreus would never forgive such a choice, would never be able to live with the knowledge that his father had damned an entire world for his sake. Or returning to his son would mean losing his son in every way that mattered. "You speak of sacrifice," Kratos said, voice breaking with an emotion he'd tried to bury for centuries. "But you do not understand what you ask. My son is everything. He is the only good thing I have left in any realm. He is the reason I continue, the reason I try to be better than the monster I was." "I know," Brynden whispered. "I know because I have seen your past, Kratos. I have watched through the weirwoods as you destroyed your own family, as you waged war on Olympus, as you drowned in rage and vengeance, until your son pulled you back from that darkness. I know what he means to you. Then you understand I cannot abandon him. I understand that true love means wanting what's best for those we love, even when it destroys us," Brynden replied. "So your son would be better served by a father who chose heroism over selfishness, even if that father never returns home. Better to remember you as a hero who died saving millions than to live with you as a monster who let millions die." Outside the cave, the whites continued their assault. The weirwood's magic flickered, ancient power beginning to fail under the sustained attack. The Night King stood beyond the chaos, waiting patiently, knowing that eventually the barriers would fall, and when they did, everyone in the cave would die. Kratos closed his eyes, feeling the weight of impossible choice pressing down on him. He thought of Sparta, of the young warrior he'd been before the gods twisted his life into tragedy. Thought of his first wife, Lysandra, his daughter Calliope, murdered by his own cursed hands. Thought of Faye, who'd seen good in him when he saw only monster. Thought of Atreus, his second chance, his redemption made flesh. Every instinct screamed to find the way home, to take Brynden's knowledge and run, to cross dimensions if necessary, to return to his son no matter the cost. But he remembered Corin's brother, dying to save his patrol. Remembered Gren, learning to fight with simple determination. Remembered the Night's Watch standing against darkness, not because they expected to win, but because someone had to stand. He remembered what it meant to be a Spartan, to hold the line, no matter the cost, to be the shield, not the sword. And slowly, painfully, Kratos understood what he had to do. "Tell me how to kill the Night King," he said finally, opening his eyes. "Not how to return home, how to end this threat. The Rangers gasped. Brendan's expression shifted to something like respect. "You choose sacrifice?" the Green Seer asked, needing to hear it confirmed. "I choose to honor my son by being the father he believes I can be," Kratos replied, voice steady despite the agony of the choice. "I choose to protect those who cannot protect themselves, as I should have done from the beginning. I choose to be better than the gods who destroyed my life." He paused, gathering himself. "And I choose to believe that if our positions were reversed, Atreus would make the same choice. He would sacrifice himself to save millions. How can I do less?" Tears froze on the Ranger's cheeks. Even Eben, silent and stoic, wiped at his eyes with a rough hand. "The Night King cannot be killed by simple violence," Brendan explained, urgency entering his voice as the barriers weakened further. "Hanamam, he is powered by ancient magic, by the death of everything that lives. But that magic has a weakness. It requires absolute cold, absolute death, absolute emptiness. If you can create enough life, enough heat, enough defiant vitality in one moment, you can overwhelm the magic that sustains him." "How much life?" Kratos asked. Brendan met his gaze with terrible knowledge. "All of it. Every drop of divine power you possess, channeled not into destruction, but into creation, into heat, into light, into the opposite of death. You must burn yourself out completely, become a star against the darkness, so bright and hot and alive that the Night King's very existence becomes impossible." "That will kill me," Kratos stated flatly. "Yes, not even your divine nature can survive channeling that much power at once. You will burn from the inside out, consumed by the same fire that defeats him." Brendan's voice softened. "But your death will save this realm, will give Westeros a chance to rebuild, to prepare, to survive. And your son will eventually learn that his father died a hero, sacrificing everything for a world that was not his own. He will mourn, but he will be proud." Kratos absorbed this, feeling the weight of finality settling over him. No return home, no reunion with Atreus, no chance to see his son grow into the man he was meant to become. Just death, and the hope that it would matter. "There is one mercy I can offer," Brendan said quietly. "I can send a message to your realm, a dream, a vision, something your son will receive in time. I can show him your choice, show him you didn't abandon him, or show him you loved him enough to become the hero he always believed you were." Something broke inside Kratos, some wall he'd built around his heart to keep functioning, to keep fighting. His shoulders shook with silent sobs, grief for a future that would never be, for a reunion that would never happen, for a son he would never hold again. But even through the grief, his resolve remained unshaken. "Send the message," Kratos said roughly. Tell him his father is sorry. Sorry for every mistake, every moment of anger, every time I failed to be what he needed. Tell him I tried to be better. Tell him he made me want to be better." "I will," Brendan promised. Outside, the barriers shattered with a sound like breaking glass. Whites poured into the cave entrance, a flood of frozen death. The Night King followed, ice sword gleaming, ere certain of victory. Kratos stood, the blades of chaos falling from his hands. He wouldn't need them for this. "Get behind me," he told the Rangers. "As far back as you can. What comes next?" He looked at them, these brave, doomed men who'd followed him into hell. "Thank you for reminding me what it means to be worth remembering." Corrin gripped his shoulder briefly, a warrior's farewell. "It's been an honor, God Killer. May you find peace in whatever lies beyond." The Rangers retreated deep into the cave as Kratos walked toward the entrance. Whites surrounded him, but he paid them no attention. His eyes were locked on the Night King, approaching with that terrible certainty of victory. "You are strong," the Night King said, perhaps genuinely curious. "Why do you not flee? Why face certain death for a realm not your own?" "Because," Kratos replied, divine power beginning to build within him, not for destruction, but for something greater. "I am a father, and fathers protect those who cannot protect themselves, even when it costs everything." "Foolish," the Night King observed. "No," Kratos replied, and suddenly he was smiling, a genuine expression, free of bitterness or rage. "This is the first wise thing I have done in centuries." And then he let go. Every ounce of divine power he possessed, accumulated through decades as the god of war, through killing Ares and Zeus and the entire Olympian pantheon, all of it channeled not into violence, but into life itself. His body became a star, a sun given human form, burning with such intensity that the ice for miles around turned instantly to steam. And the whites disintegrated, the White Walkers shattered like glass, and the Night King, ancient enemy of all life, screamed as the magic sustaining him crumbled under an assault of pure, defiant vitality. Kratos burned, his skin cracked, light blazing from within. The pain was beyond description, but he welcomed it. This was the price. This was the sacrifice. And as consciousness faded, as divine fire consumed mortal flesh and godly power collapsed inward, Kratos thought of Atreus one last time. "Be better than me, boy. Be the man I tried to become for you, and know that I loved you. Always." The explosion was visible from the wall, 100 miles away, a pillar of light that turned night to day, that pushed back winter itself for one brilliant, impossible moment. When it faded, the land of always winter was changed. The ice had melted for miles around the Weirwood Cave, revealing Earth that hadn't seen sun in millennia. The Night King was gone, destroyed so completely that not even frozen dust remained. The White Walkers were dead, their magic broken, their army collapsing into meaningless corpses. And in the center of the scorched earth, where Kratos had made his stand, lay a body. Burned beyond recognition, divine power exhausted, mortal life ended. The ghost of Sparta, the god killer, the father who chose the world over his son, because that's what his son would have wanted. The four rangers emerged from the cave, faces streaked with tears, carrying the broken form with reverence usually reserved for kings. "We bring him back," Corin said, voice thick with emotion. "We carry him to the wall, to Castle Black, to Winterfell if we must. The whole realm will know what he did, what he sacrificed." They buried Kratos at the base of the wall, where the ice met stone, in a grave marked by a simple cairn. No grand tomb, no elaborate ceremony, just the acknowledgement that here lay a warrior who'd stood when all others would have run. The news spread across the 7 kingdoms like wildfire. The Night King was dead. The long night had been stopped before it truly began, and the savior had been a stranger from another realm who'd given everything for a world not his own. In Winterfell, Lord Eddard Stark ordered a feast in honor of the fallen warrior. In King's Landing, even the cynical lords acknowledged that something miraculous had occurred. Throughout the realm, songs were sung, tales were told, and the name Kratos became legend. But far away in another realm entirely, a boy woke from troubled sleep. Atreus sat up in his bed in Midgard, heart pounding, tears streaming down his face. He'd dreamed of his father, seen everything through Brendan's vision, seen the choice, the sacrifice, the final moments. "Father," he whispered brokenly. "Father, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you had to choose. But," his voice strengthened, pride mixing with grief, "but you were a hero, a true hero. You became what Mother always knew you could be." He stood moving to the window, looking out at the forests of Midgard. Somewhere in the fabric of reality itself, he felt his father's presence fade. Not gone entirely, but distant, unreachable, transformed into something beyond mortal comprehension. "I'll be better," Atreus promised the Dawn. "I'll honor your sacrifice by being the man you tried to become. I'll protect those who need protecting. I'll use my power wisely. I'll be the son you deserved." And in the spaces between realms, in the places where souls travel after death, Kratos heard those words and found peace. He'd failed his first family through rage and divine manipulation, but he'd saved his second son through sacrifice and heroism, had given Atreus a father worth remembering, worth honoring, worth becoming. It was enough. It had to be enough. At Castle Black, Lord Commander Mormont stood atop the wall, staring north at the sunrise that would have been impossible with the Night King's victory. Behind him, the Night's Watch continued its eternal vigil, now bolstered by recruits drawn to the order that had harbored a hero. "He was Night's Watch," Mormont said to Maester Aemon, who stood beside him in the cold dawn air. We never swore the oath, but he stood watch anyway. Defended the realms of men against the darkness. That's all we've ever asked. He was more than Night's Watch, Aemon replied, his blind eyes somehow seeing what others missed. He was redemption given form, a god who learned to be human, a killer who learned to be a protector, a father who loved his son enough to let him go. In the years that followed, Westeros would change. The threat of the Long Night's return faded to distant memory. The Seven Kingdoms continued their games of power and succession. Winter came and went, as it always had. But at the Wall, the Night's Watch remembered. They told the story of the ghost of Sparta to every new recruit. They maintained his grave with the honor usually reserved for Lord Commanders. And they made him one of their legends, a reminder that heroism wasn't about power or divine right, but about choosing to protect others, even when it cost everything. And sometimes, on cold nights when the wind blew from the north, Rangers swore they could feel a presence watching over them. Not malevolent, not divine, just the spirit of a warrior who'd learned, too late perhaps, what it meant to be truly worthy of the title hero. The ghost of Sparta became legend in Westeros, his name spoken with reverence from the Wall to Dorne. But the true legacy wasn't the songs or the stories, it was the choice itself. A father who loved his son enough to become the hero that son believed him to be, even when it meant never seeing him again. In Midgard, Atreus grew into a man worthy of both his parents' legacies. He carried his father's strength and his mother's wisdom, tempered by the knowledge that true power lay not in dominance, but in sacrifice. When he told others of his father, he spoke not of the god-killer or the destroyer of Olympus, but of the hero who'd saved an entire world because it was right. The dimensional rift that brought Kratos to Westeros never reopened. Perhaps it had served its purpose, to give a broken god one final chance at redemption, one last opportunity to prove he could be better than his rage. And in that frozen wasteland, facing impossible odds, Kratos had proven it. He'd been a Spartan warrior, a god of war, a destroyer of pantheons. But in the end, he'd become something greater, a father whose love transcended realms, whose sacrifice saved millions, whose choice defined what it truly meant to be a hero. And the Game of Thrones continued. Winter came and went. The realm moved forward, as realms always do. But at the base of the Wall, in a simple grave marked by a cairn of stones, lay a warrior who'd reminded the world that heroism wasn't about divine power or legendary weapons. It was about standing between the darkness and those you'd sworn to protect, even when standing meant dying, even when protecting meant never going home. That was the legacy of Kratos, god-killer and father, ghost of Sparta and savior of Westeros. Not a tale of triumph, but of sacrifice. Not a story of victory, but of love. And in the end, love was the only power that truly mattered.